Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another episode of my Shock to the Past series. For those of you who don't know what Shock to the Past is, it's a series that consists of horror films from the 60s, 70s and 80s that shook audiences back then and how they shape up by today's standards. So today we're going to be looking at what many people believe is the greatest horror film ever made. And I'm not really here to debate that because I really can't see any reason as to why this isn't the greatest horror film ever made. And I'm actually surprised that I haven't actually included this movie in this series yet. It's because any series that features films of this nature, you have to have this movie in there. So it was released in the year 1974, directed by Tobe Hooper, and this movie is called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So this is definitely one of the most enduring horror films that you will ever come across. It basically is about a group of friends. Now, two of these friends are actually relatives, and they're going out to rural Texas in order to investigate claims of grave robbing. So they believe that some of their family members that have passed on, their graves may have been robbed, so they want to go and check it out. But while they're going to check it out, they stumble across a farmhouse belonging to a psychotic family that has one person in particular who is a mammoth man who wields a chainsaw, and he wears the faces of his victims as a mask, and he's known as Leatherface. And this is Leatherface, that's the iconic horror villain, and it would basically give birth to many horror villains after that. And so their night is going to go from sheer terror to absolute panic very, very quickly as their quest for survival begins. So whether or not they actually pull through, that is something that you're going to have to check out for yourself. So as I said, one of the greatest horror films ever made, and I actually believe that is because it was made in 1974, but it still has all of what makes the movie so good by today's standards. It will still shake an audience because it's relying on all the good things in horror. And the good things in horror is about atmosphere. It's about making you believe that you're watching something terrifying. And this is a movie that will suck all the air out of you. It will leave you panting for breath because you feel as though you've been pushed to your absolute limits. And those limits are pushed through the technical brilliance that this movie has. This movie doesn't have great acting. It doesn't really have great special effects. It's all about the anticipation of something really horrible happening that is magnified by the brilliant use of audio and the overall visual of the actual threat that this movie possesses. And so this is a movie that does play strong games with you psychologically, is that you actually believe this is a movie that is a lot more brutal than it actually is. In fact, I can count on one hand how many times you actually see blood in this film, and there's not a lot of blood when you actually see it, but you come away thinking that it was so much more because of the level of torment that Tobe Hooper has put you through. And this is something that is a lost art. A lot of horror movies these days, they don't want to go into the atmosphere. They don't want to make you feel as though you need a shower at the end of the experience. They want to do things very quickly and very lazily, and that doesn't translate very well. Whether it's excessive gore, whether it's nudity, sex, all that really cheap, jump scares, all that kind of crap that pollutes horror these days, it's something that is non-present in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There are no jump scares, there is no nudity, there is no gratuitous violence. It is all basically the psychology of what is happening, the psychology of the pain and torment that these characters are going through. And that's why I think it's so brilliant, is because it actually makes you believe you're watching something so much more brutal than you actually are, and it's starting to play tricks on you. And you can put yourself into the shoes of these characters who are at the mercy of this terrifying villain who would since go on to be the stuff of legend. And so I thought the villain played by Gunnar Hansen was absolutely fantastic. Just this hulking figure who doesn't speak. He just mumbles and groans and makes these caveman-like body language that makes him so terrifying. There's no real explanation behind this family, and you don't need an explanation because you're as oblivious to the situation as these friends are. But when the actual family come out of the woodworks and they actually integrate into the film, this is where the terror really kicks up a notch. And so at the start of the film, you do have a sense of dread, and the sense of dread is through the very low budget visuals that actually portrays the sweat and the grime through the screen, and so you feel as though you need a shower, you feel as though you're very unclean, and the very screeching soundtrack and the score that helps create something that I don't want to be here. Nothing particular bad is happening at this particular moment, but I don't want to stay around for what's around the corner because Tobe Hooper has created something that is very unpleasant. And as a true horror experience, it has to be unpleasant. This movie I wouldn't say is entertaining, but it is very, very hard to watch. And even by today's standards, it does translate very well, and it does stand the test of time, and it never feels as though it's outdated. It's because everything works to absolute perfection. Now, as I said, some of the acting was pretty bad, although the main actor, this woman, she was actually very genuine, very authentic, especially towards the end where all the tormenting sort of aspects happen. I thought, all right, well, I can really I can buy what is going on. But there were some characters that the acting was pretty ordinary, but you can push that aside is because it has so much more going for it than it does against it. And so I push that aside is because it's all about the technical aspects of what makes a genuine horror experience. There are a few scenes in this film that are absolutely iconic. My favourite horror scene of all time actually is the dinner scene. I'm not going to tell you, if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to tell you what happens, but there is a dinner scene, and I thought that was just really, really cruel, and it was very, very sadistic. But once again, there is no violence in this particular scene, and so that you feel as though, all right, just leave this person alone, they can't take any more. It's because of all the torment, it's because of all the psychology that is just a really a strong black force in this movie that just becomes a character of its own. And there's another, the iconic scene of Leatherface chasing someone through the forest with a chainsaw. I thought that was fantastic. And there's another scene involving a hitchhiker that I thought was incredibly memorable. And so Gunnar Hansen playing Leatherface, you've got Edwin Neal, who plays the hitchhiker in the film. I thought those two characters were very, very memorable, and the whole film just reeks of memorable quality. And so, yes, this does earn, I reckon, I definitely think it earns its right as being regarded as the greatest horror film ever made, is because it definitely is a prime example of how to make a genuine horror film. And so if you are one of the few that haven't seen this movie yet, do yourself a favour, watch it now, because I definitely think it is the most important horror film ever made, and at the same time the best. So it's absolutely brilliant, it's a masterpiece. I will watch this time and time again. Alright guys, that's it for this episode. Until next episode, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.